So the last few videos have been pretty difficult because I've been talking about abstractions. And of course, we use the thinking mind at first when we deal with abstractions, but that's what the thinking mind is. It's an abstraction. And so it's a tough ride. And I realize that. In fact, when you start to experience, when you start putting some space between you and the thinking mind, and you start to directly experience the nature of these abstractions, that's nothing less than what we might call enlightenment itself. That's a pretty profound thing. So I woke up this morning thinking, well, let's throw out a couple real easygoing videos. And the only thing that came to me was one, maybe do a video on Frank Gallagher. And then I thought, well, maybe do a video on death. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll do a video on the ego and the nature of the ego playing who we are, when in fact it's really not who we are at all. It's actually part of the collective Borg mind, or whatever you want to call it. It's society. It is itself this kind of massive abstraction, and that's the one I went with. And so when I talk about the thinking mind, none of it's who you are. It's a program that's part biology, because the way the brain is wired, it's very set up for this. And we know some of the neural structures now. So I'm going to do another video on the default mode network. It's a collection of neural areas that engages when we start doing abstract thinking. And of course, I talk a lot about the left side of the brain and its abilities for confabulation. And so I think the two work together. I'm going to do a paper on this, that the brain is set up so part of the brain actually creates the abstractions, and another part of the brain gets us to believe in them. So, debugging this program isn't easy at all. It's a very effective program. I mean, it's been effective for the last 40,000 years. It's transformed the globe as we know it, and it's not going anywhere. It seems like this kind of abstraction virus is escalating, but at the same time, it does seem like there are a lot of people talking about it more. And from Krishnamurti to Advaita Vedanta, which is of course very old, they explicitly point out the mind, and even some of these very old teachings make it sound like almost prophetic, like they talk about it almost as if it was a computer program. And so when we talk about know thyself and this act of creation, to bypass the program and figure out who we actually are, part of that entails recognizing this voice in the head, or the language. Did you invent the language? Did you invent its worries? That voice in the head is actually the group, the collective, pretending to be who you are. And just to give you a feel for what I'm talking about, sometimes people play philosopher. They say, well, I'm going to figure out who I am. I'm going to get into philosophy. Well, that's a great thing to do. But I want to remind you that philosophy is a creation to some extent, not Eastern philosophy, but certainly Western philosophy is heavily influenced by the processes of the thinking mind. There's even a quote, I think it was by Wittgenstein, who even said that that's what philosophy is. It's categorizing the processes of thinking. And so when we get into these philosophical questions, we think this is the process of self-discovery, and I could throw some of these at you: free will versus determinism, idealism versus materialism. A really popular thing going on right now, where people are very heated in this debate: is materialism real? Is idealism real? And idealism is sort of making a comeback, but every time it's this dichotomy, this or that. And that's the way the thinking mind likes its existence, and it makes it feel like it's part of, like, you're really discovering who you are if you choose A or B. But what I'm here to remind you is, or demind you rather, is that there's always option C. So when people ask me, like, well, do you believe in free will or determinism? Do you think it's idealism or materialism? I'm like, look, the thinking mind has its conception of reality. Whatever reality is, it's far more than these dichotomies that the thinking mind is coming up with. So somehow we've been bamboozled into believing that this categorical thinking program inside our skull is who we are. And we think that the more we discover which side of a dichotomy we fall on, that's the process of self-discovery, when the actual process of know thyself is to realize you're not part of this process at all. None of the worries that you're concerned with, none of the daydreams that people fall into, and that's part of this default mode network. Whenever our mind wanders, it feels like it's us kind of fantasizing or wondering or daydreaming, but it isn't even us doing the daydreaming. It's this program kicking in that separates us from reality. And of course, that's one of the things that what if I could just turn the program off? And again, the evidence seems to suggest that meditation is a way to turn down the default mode network, to turn down these neural systems, to create these abstractions. Psychedelics seem to be a way that these neural systems turn down. So even though we're stuck with this false sense of who we are, we're also at a really interesting time where we're beginning to understand that this ego is part of the collective. It's part of the reason we worry so much about what other people think. I mean, why do you worry so much about what other people think when you don't even know who these other people are? It's because these other people aren't even out there. The people that you worry about and the people you worry about their opinions, they're not even, these are just, this is just part of the program. This is part of the ego program that's actually the collective. So of course it is trying to keep you in line by worrying about what other people think. And again, what happens when we turn it off? Well, again, you might think, well, just kind of, it'll be the breakdown of society. And you might think, well, what happens if people realize they're not their ego and all of a sudden it's chaos? But actually, we don't see that happening at all. So these modern Buddhas who have realized this, like Krishnamurti, Ramana Maharshi, I mean, people have realized that they're not this collective abstraction, and they do nothing of the sense. They don't create chaos. They don't steal. They don't lose a sense of morality. So I mean, it's pretty clear that there's no real loss with this except to the sense of the ego, which of course its entire existence depends on this. So I just want to leave off with kind of do a very short video, and it's sort of I just dragged it out, but I want to leave you with a practice, because again, we can go into these two different modes of existence. One very abstract ego that's collective, that feels like me. When I sit here and I say I'm 54, I'm a college professor, and I'm introverted, and here's my political flaw, and I go into all of these details, none of that's who I am. It feels like it's who I am, but these are all pre-decided choices, A or B, that have been pre-wired, predetermined, and as part of the collective. And the collective is saying, look here, you can be part of the collective as long as you play ball. The other option, the real other option, is to recognize, embrace something. You have to have faith first for the bridge to appear, and then you leap, you jump, you have faith, and then the bridge actually appears. And that's a real important part of this process. It's like William James said, first I'll believe in free will, and that will be my first act of free will be to actually believe in it. And the other mode of existence is to recognize, to feel and embrace that you're not this voice in the head, that you're not the collective. Then that whole process of the artwork begins. The creative act actually can start. And no one can tell you who you are. No one can tell you, because it's absolutely your own piece of art that you create during this human experience.